Welcome back to Crime Stories for Sleep, where the night reveals truths that daylight conceals. Tonight, we're checking into roadside motels. Those neon-lit havens for weary travelers where anonymity meets desperation and where some guests never quite check out. Motels, America's temporary shelters, where thousands of stories unfold behind identical doors. Places where people stop between destinations, seeking nothing more than a clean bed and a safe night's rest. But sometimes, the previous occupants refuse to vacate. And sometimes, checking in means joining a guest registry that extends far beyond the earthly realm. Tonight, I bring you 5 true stories from motels across the country. Encounters that will make you question every roadside stop, every vacancy sign, and every room key you've ever been handed. Stories from travelers who discovered that some establishments cater to clientele that exist between the living and the dead. These are real experiences from real people who sought simple accommodation and found themselves sharing space with guests whose stays had been permanently extended. Story 1. The Midnight Registration. Sarah Martinez was driving cross-country from Phoenix to Jacksonville when exhaustion forced her to stop at the Desert Winds Motel on Interstate 40 in New Mexico. It was 11:47 p.m., and the neon vacancy sign flickered weakly against the dark desert sky. The motel looked typical of countless roadside establishments, single-story, horseshoe-shaped building with rooms facing a central parking area. Vending machines humming under harsh fluorescent lights. Sarah had been driving for 12 hours and needed sleep more than comfort. The Desert Winds Motel wasn't fancy, but it appeared clean and safe, with adequate lighting in the parking area and what seemed like normal foot traffic for a highway stop. The motel office was small and cramped, with wood-paneled walls covered in local tourist brochures and a registration desk that had seen decades of weary travelers. Behind the counter sat a man in his 60s, watching a small television with the sound turned low. "I need a room for one night," Sarah said, approaching the counter. The clerk looked up with tired eyes. $48. Cash only. Sarah paid and received a key attached to a heavy plastic tag marked Room 17. The clerk provided no other information. No checkout time, no amenities description, no small talk about her journey. Just the key and a receipt. Room 17 was at the far end of the motel's west wing, isolated from the other occupied rooms, but close to the vending machines and ice maker. The room was exactly what Sarah expected. Double bed with a faded floral bedspread. Small television bolted to the dresser, bathroom with basic fixtures, and air conditioning unit that rattled but provided adequate cooling. Sarah showered, set her alarm for 6 a.m., and settled into bed with the intention of getting 6 hours of sleep before continuing her journey. But sleep proved elusive in Room 17. It started with voices in the adjoining room. Room 19 shared a wall with Sarah's room, and she could hear what sounded like a heated argument between a man and woman. The voices were muffled, but clearly agitated, with occasional raised words penetrating the thin wall. Sarah tried to ignore the disturbance, but the argument continued for over an hour. Finally, she called the front desk to complain about the noise. "Room 19? The clerk said, sounding confused. "Room 19's been empty for 3 months. We had a pipe burst in there back in August, and it's been out of service ever since." Sarah was certain about what she was hearing. Someone's definitely in there. "They've been arguing for over an hour. I'll come take a look." 10 minutes later, Sarah heard footsteps outside her door, followed by the sound of a key being inserted into the lock of Room 19. Through her window, she could see the clerk opening the door to the adjacent room and shining a flashlight inside. The arguing stopped immediately. The clerk spent several minutes in Room 19, then knocked on Sarah's door. When she opened it, he looked genuinely perplexed. "Nobody in there. Room's empty, furniture's covered with plastic sheets." Been that way since the water damage. But as soon as the clerk left, the arguing resumed. Now Sarah could make out some of the words. Accusations about money, threats to leave, desperate pleas to work things out. The voices sounded like people in genuine distress, fighting about problems that couldn't be easily resolved. Sarah moved to the shared wall and pressed her ear against it. The voices were definitely coming from room 19, despite what the clerk had found. The argument had escalated to shouting, and she could hear furniture being moved around. Doors slamming, objects being thrown. Then, suddenly, silence. Complete, absolute silence that seemed to press against Sarah's eardrums like a physical weight. No air conditioning hum, no highway noise, no sound at all except her own breathing and heartbeat. The silence lasted for exactly 3 minutes. Then the arguing resumed, but now it sounded different. The voices were saying the same words, having the same argument, but starting over from the beginning. Like a recording being replayed. Sarah listened to the entire argument cycle 3 more times. Each repetition was identical. Same words, same timing, same escalation to violence, same sudden silence. The 4th cycle began exactly as the others had, but this time Sarah could understand every word clearly. The argument was about a drug deal gone wrong. The man had stolen money intended for a drug purchase, and the woman was terrified that their dealer would kill them both. The man kept insisting he could fix the situation, while the woman begged him to run away together before it was too late. The argument ended with sounds of a struggle, a woman's scream, 3 gunshots, and then silence. Sarah realized she was listening to the final argument of 2 people who had died in room 19, but if they had died, why was the room listed as out of service due to water damage? Unable to sleep with the recurring argument cycle, Sarah decided to check out early. She gathered her belongings and went to the office to return her key. The same clerk was still behind the counter, now reading a paperback novel. Checking out early? He asked without looking up. The noise from room 19 kept me awake all night. The clerk finally looked at her directly. I told you, room 19's been empty for months. What really happened in that room? The clerk was quiet for a long moment. You seem like a nice lady, so I'll tell you straight. 3 months ago, we had 2 guests in room 19, drug dealers from California, using our place as a stopping point for transactions. They got into an argument about money, and the man shot the woman, then killed himself. Why did you tell me it was water damage? Because most people don't want to sleep next door to a murder-suicide room. Water damage sounds better for business. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Do other guests hear the arguing? Only some. Maybe 1 out of 10. We've learned to put those guests in different rooms when they complain. Why didn't you move me last night? The clerk shrugged. You didn't ask to be moved. You just wanted me to check the room. Sarah left the Desert Winds Motel as the sun was rising, but she couldn't stop thinking about the argument she'd heard. The desperation in the woman's voice, the man's stubborn refusal to acknowledge the danger they faced, the inevitability of the violent end to their story. She researched the incident when she reached Jacksonville and found newspaper articles about the murder-suicide at the Desert Winds Motel. The details matched exactly what she'd heard through the wall. A drug deal dispute, stolen money, threats from dealers, and a tragic end that could have been avoided if the couple had simply run away, as the woman had begged. Sarah often thinks about that night when she sees roadside motels during her travels. She wonders how many rooms and how many motels harbor similar echoes of final arguments, last conversations, and ultimate tragedies, and she wonders if the woman in room 19 is still trying to convince the man to run away, still hoping that this time he'll listen, still believing that they can escape the fate that's already been decided. Some arguments never end. Some pleas for escape continue long after escape is no longer possible, and some motels collect these final conversations like souvenirs. playing them back for guests who are sensitive enough to hear the voices of those who checked in but never checked out. Story 2. The morning shift. David Kim worked the front desk at the Crossroads Motor Inn for 2 years. Located at the intersection of two major highways, Crossroads served truck drivers, traveling salespeople, and families on road trips who needed affordable accommodation. David worked the night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., handling late arrivals, early checkouts, and the occasional emergency. David appreciated the night shift because it allowed him to study for his college courses during quiet periods. Most nights involved minimal activity, checking in a few late arrivals, providing directions or recommendations to guests, and maintaining security for the property. The work was straightforward and gave David the income he needed while pursuing his education. Crossroads Motor Inn was a well-maintained establishment with 36 rooms, a small swimming pool, and a breakfast area that served continental breakfast to guests each morning. The clientele was mostly working-class travelers who needed clean, affordable rooms. And David had developed positive relationships with many of the regular customers who stayed at Crossroads during their business travels. On the morning of September 23rd, David experienced something that challenged his understanding of time, death, and the nature of customer service itself. It was 6:15 a.m., and David was preparing for the end of his shift when a woman approached the front desk. She appeared to be in her 40s, wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase and overnight bag. She looked professional but tired, like someone who had been traveling for business and was eager to reach her destination. "I'd like to check out of room 24, she said. Placing a key on the counter, David looked up the room in the computer system. Room 24 was listed as vacant and had been unoccupied for the past week. The last registered guest had checked out on September 15th. "I'm sorry, but room 24 hasn't been occupied." "Are you sure about the room number?" The woman looked confused. "I checked in last night around 11:30. Room 24. I have the receipt right here." She handed David a receipt from Crossroads Motor Inn. It was printed on their standard receipt paper, had the correct business information, and showed a registration for room 24 on September 22nd at 11:34 p.m. The receipt appeared to be completely legitimate, but David had been working since 11 p.m., and no one had checked into room 24. He had handled only 2 registrations during his entire shift, both for rooms in different parts of the motel. "Ma'am, I've been working the front desk all night, and I didn't check you in. Also, our computer shows room 24 is vacant." The woman became increasingly agitated. "Look, I don't care what your computer says. I paid for room 24. I slept in room 24, and now I want to check out of room 24. This is ridiculous." David decided to investigate further. "Let me walk over to room 24 and take a look." He accompanied the woman to room 24. The door was locked, and when David used his master key to open it, the room was clearly unoccupied. The bed was made with fresh linens, the bathroom was stocked with clean towels, and there were no signs that anyone had stayed in the room recently. "This is impossible," the woman said, staring into the empty room. "I slept here last night. I used the shower, I watched television, I set the alarm clock." David noticed something odd about the alarm clock on the nightstand. It was an older model that Crossroads had stopped using in guest rooms over 5 years ago. The current rooms all had digital alarm clocks, but room 24 had an analog clock with hands that were stopped at 3:17. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Elizabeth Carter. I'm a pharmaceutical sales representative. I travel this route every month." David returned to the office and searched their customer database for Elizabeth Carter. He found multiple entries. She had indeed been a regular customer, staying at Crossroads once or twice per month for business travel. But the last entry was from September 22nd, 2018, 5 years ago. "Ms. Carter, according to our records, you were a regular customer, But your last stay with us was in 2018. Elizabeth stared at the computer screen, looking genuinely confused. That can't be right. I stayed here last month, and the month before that. I traveled this route for Meridian Pharmaceuticals. David had an uncomfortable feeling about the situation. He decided to do some additional research. Miss Carter, can you tell me what day it is today? September 23rd, 2018. Why? Ma'am, today is September 23rd, 2023. It's been 5 years since your last stay with us. Elizabeth laughed, but it sounded forced. That's ridiculous. Look at my phone. She pulled out a smartphone, but when David looked at it, the screen was blank and wouldn't respond to her touch. She tried pressing buttons and swiping the screen, but nothing happened. I don't understand what's happening, she said. Her voice becoming strained. David excused himself and returned to the office to call his manager. He explained the situation and asked for guidance on how to handle a guest who seemed to believe she had stayed in a room that had been vacant, and who appeared to think it was 5 years earlier than the actual date. His manager, Janet Walsh, arrived within 20 minutes. She listened to David's account and then approached Elizabeth Carter, who was sitting in the lobby looking increasingly distressed. Ms. Carter, I'm Janet Walsh, the general manager. I remember you from your previous stays with us. You were always a polite guest, and we appreciated your business. Thank you. Can you help me understand what's happening? Everyone's telling me it's 2023, but that's impossible. Janet sat down next to Elizabeth. Miss Carter, I have some difficult news. According to public records, Elizabeth Carter of Meridian Pharmaceuticals died in a car accident on September 23rd, 2018. The accident occurred about 10 miles from here, on Highway 287. Elizabeth stared at Janet with growing confusion and fear. That's impossible. I'm sitting right here talking to you. Miss Carter, I think you've been trying to complete your last business trip. You checked into our motel on September 22nd, 2018, and were planning to check out the next morning to continue to your sales appointments. But you died in the car accident before you could complete your checkout. As Janet spoke, Elizabeth began to fade. Not dramatically, but gradually, like a photograph slowly losing its color and definition. She became more translucent with each passing moment. I have 3 more sales calls to make, Elizabeth said, her voice becoming fainter. I can't be late for my appointments. Your work is finished, Miss Carter. Meridian Pharmaceuticals knows you were dedicated to your job. You can rest now. Elizabeth smiled, and for a moment she became more solid, more present. I always tried to be professional. Customer service was important to me. Then she was gone. The lobby chair was empty, and the receipt she had shown David was no longer on the counter. David worked at Crossroads Motor Inn for another year, and he often thought about Elizabeth Carter. Janet explained that the accident that killed her had occurred while she was rushing to make her morning sales appointments. Driving too fast on a rain-slicked highway. David learned that Elizabeth had been known throughout the pharmaceutical industry for her dedication and reliability. She rarely missed appointments, always arrived on time, and maintained excellent relationships with the medical professionals she served. 6 months after the encounter, David received a letter at the motel addressed to Elizabeth Carter. It was from Meridian Pharmaceuticals, informing her that she had been posthumously awarded their Sales Professional of the Year, recognition for her dedication and service to customers. David kept the letter in the office files. Sometimes when he worked late shifts, he would think about Elizabeth Carter and her determination to complete her final business trip. Some people are so dedicated to their work that death can't stop them from trying to finish their responsibilities. Some customer service commitments extend beyond life itself, and some checkouts take 5 years to complete, not because of administrative errors, but because some guests refuse to leave until they've fulfilled their professional obligations. Elizabeth Carter finally checked out, when she realized her work was finished and her reputation was secure. Sometimes, the most important checkout process isn't about hotel procedures. It's about completing the mission that defined your life. Story 3. The Reunion. Mark Stevens and his college fraternity brothers had been meeting for annual reunions for 15 years. Every September, the 5 men would gather for a weekend of reminiscing, catching up on their families and careers, and reliving their college memories. This year, they had chosen the Pine Ridge Resort, a rustic lodge in the mountains of Colorado that offered hiking, fishing, and the kind of isolated setting that encouraged honest conversation and genuine friendship. Pine Ridge Resort was a family-owned establishment that had been operating for over 40 years. The main lodge housed the registration desk, restaurant, and common areas, while individual cabins scattered throughout the pine forest provided private accommodation for guests. Mark had reserved Cabin 7 for the group, a 3-bedroom unit that would comfortably house all 5 men for their weekend retreat. Mark's fraternity brothers, David, Brian, Tom, and Jeff, had remained close despite living in different cities and pursuing different careers. Their annual reunions were sacred events, protected time when busy professionals and fathers could reconnect with the friendships that had shaped their young adult years. When Mark arrived at Pine Ridge Resort on Friday evening, he found his 4 friends already gathered in Cabin 7, unpacking their luggage and planning the weekend's activities. The cabin was exactly what they had hoped for, rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, fully equipped kitchen, and a deck that overlooked a small mountain lake. "Mark, finally!" David called out as Mark entered the cabin. "We were about to start without you." The 5 friends spent Friday evening around the fireplace, drinking beer and sharing updates about their lives. David talked about his promotion to partner at his law firm. Brian showed pictures of his daughter's recent graduation from high school. Tom discussed his new business venture. Jeff shared news about his recent engagement. Mark felt grateful for these friendships that had endured through 15 years of marriages, divorces, career changes, and family challenges. Despite their different life paths, the 5 men had maintained the easy camaraderie that had bonded them during their college years. Saturday morning brought perfect weather for hiking. The group planned a day trip to a scenic overlook about 5 miles from the resort. They packed lunch, filled water bottles, and set out on the trail that wound through dense pine forest toward higher elevation. The hike was challenging but enjoyable, with plenty of opportunities for conversation and photograph taking. The friends stopped frequently to rest and admire the mountain scenery, taking pictures to commemorate their weekend together. It was during their lunch break at the scenic overlook that Mark began to notice something strange about his friends' behavior. Their conversation seemed oddly repetitive, focusing on the same topics they had discussed the previous evening. David mentioned his promotion again, using exactly the same words he had used the night before. Brian showed the same graduation pictures, making identical comments about his daughter's achievements. Mark attributed the repetition to the casual nature of reunion conversation. People often shared the same stories multiple times during social gatherings. But as the day progressed, the repetition became more pronounced and more precise. During the hike back to the cabin, Tom told the same joke he had told at lunch, using identical timing and inflection. Jeff asked the same question about Mark's work that he had asked during the morning hike. The conversations weren't just similar, they were exact repetitions. That evening, Mark suggested they build a fire on the cabin's deck and continue their reunion under the stars. As they gathered around the fire, Mark noticed that his friends were wearing the same clothes they had worn the previous evening. Not similar clothes, the exact same outfits, down to the positioning of wrinkles and stains. "David," Mark said carefully, "didn't you spill barbecue sauce on that shirt last night?" David looked down at his shirt, which indeed had a barbecue sauce stain in the same location it had been the previous evening. "Yeah, I'm a messy eater. Good thing I brought extra shirts." But when Mark glanced into the cabin, he could see David's other shirts still folded in his suitcase, exactly as they had been when he arrived. The conversation around the fire proceeded exactly as it had the previous evening. Same stories, same jokes, same comments about the mountain scenery and the quality of the cabin. Mark found himself responding to questions before his friends asked them, because he had heard the identical conversation 24 hours earlier. When Mark went to bed that night, he was deeply unsettled but couldn't identify a specific reason for his concern. His friends seemed normal, the reunion was proceeding as planned, and everyone appeared to be enjoying themselves. But Sunday morning brought a revelation that changed everything. Mark woke early and walked to the main lodge to get coffee and a newspaper. The resort manager, a friendly woman named Carol, greeted him at the front desk. "How's your reunion going?" She asked. "Fine, thanks. My friends and I have been coming to places like this for our annual get-togethers for 15 years. Carol's expression changed. 15 years? That's interesting. Why? Well, we've had groups of 5 men staying in cabin 7 every September for the past 6 years. Always the same time, always the same activities. But they never seem to age, and they always have the exact same conversations." Mark felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Carol pulled out a guest registry and showed Mark entries for cabin 7 dating back 6 years. Same names, same dates, same group size. "We started noticing the pattern after the 3rd year. The same. 5 men, booking the same cabin for the same weekend, having what appeared to be identical reunions. That's impossible. This is our first time at Pine Ridge Resort. Mr. Stevens, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your group died in a car accident 6 years ago. You were driving back from your reunion at Lakeside Lodge when your vehicle went off the mountain road during a snowstorm." Mark stared at the guest registry, trying to process what Carol was telling him. "We're dead?" "According to the newspaper reports, all 5 of you died in the accident. But every September, you check into cabin 7 and have your reunion weekend, just like you planned to do before the accident." Carol showed Mark newspaper clippings from 6 years earlier. The headlines described a tragic accident involving 5 college friends who had been killed while returning from their annual reunion. The article included photographs of all 5 men: Mark, David, Brian, Tom, and Jeff. "Why are we here? I think you're completing the reunion you were meant to have. The accident happened on your way home from Lakeside Lodge, but maybe this is the reunion you really wanted. The perfect weekend with perfect weather, perfect conversations, and perfect friendship." Mark returned to cabin 7 and observed his friends with new understanding. They were indeed having the perfect reunion. No arguments, no awkward moments, no reminders of the problems and stresses that had complicated their adult lives. They were simply enjoying each other's company exactly as they had during their college years. "Guys," Mark said during their Sunday morning breakfast, "we need to talk about something." But as he began to explain what Carol had told him, his friends looked at him with confusion and concern. "Mark, are you feeling okay?" David asked. "You're talking about car accidents and death. We're just here for our reunion. Don't you remember anything about a car accident?" "What accident?" "We drove up here Friday evening, just like we planned." Mark realized that his friends weren't aware of their situation. They were experiencing the reunion exactly as they had hoped it would be, without the knowledge that it was their final gathering. Mark faced a choice: tell his friends the truth about their death, potentially destroying their perfect reunion, or allow them to continue enjoying their ideal weekend together. Mark chose to let the reunion continue. He participated in the conversations, even though he had heard them before. He laughed at the jokes, even though he knew the punchlines. He enjoyed the company of his best friends, knowing that this perfect weekend was all they had left. Sunday evening, as they prepared to pack and check out, Mark felt a profound sadness. The reunion had indeed been perfect, No external pressures, no family obligations, no career concerns. Just 5 friends enjoying each other's company in a beautiful setting. Same time next year? David asked as they loaded their luggage. Absolutely, Mark replied, knowing that next year they would have the exact same reunion, with the same conversations, the same activities, and the same perfect friendship. Mark checked out of cabin 7, understanding that some reunions are too important to end, some friendships are too valuable to abandon, and some perfect weekends are worth repeating forever. The Pine Ridge Resort continues to host the annual reunion of 5 college friends every September. They check into cabin 7, hike to the scenic overlook, build fires under the stars, and celebrate a friendship that death couldn't break. Carol, the resort manager, ensures that cabin 7 is always available for their reunion. She considers them her most reliable guests, always polite, always appreciative, and always exactly on time. Some reservations are permanent. Some friendships transcend mortality. And some reunions are so perfect that they deserve to last forever. Story 4. The laundry service. Jennifer Walsh had been working housekeeping at the Budget Motor Lodge for 3 years. And during that time she had developed a deep appreciation for the dignity that could be maintained even in modest accommodations. Located on a busy commercial strip that served as the main corridor through the industrial section of the city, the Budget Motor Lodge provided essential accommodation for construction workers on temporary assignments, families experiencing housing transitions, and travelers who needed clean, affordable lodging without luxury amenities they wouldn't use during brief stays. The Budget Motor Lodge was a practical establishment that had been serving working-class clientele for over 20 years. The building featured 32 rooms arranged in 2 parallel structures, connected by a central office and laundry facility. While the motel didn't offer luxury amenities like swimming pools, fitness centers, or continental breakfast, it maintained high standards for cleanliness, safety, and basic comfort. Jennifer had specifically chosen to work at Budget Motor Lodge because she understood and respected the clientele the motel served. Many guests were people working hard to improve their circumstances, construction workers earning money to support families in other states, individuals transitioning between permanent housing situations, travelers who prioritized budget efficiency over luxury accommodations. Jennifer believed these guests deserved the same quality of service and attention that would be provided at more expensive establishments. Jennifer worked the day shift, typically arriving at 8 a.m. and finishing by 4 p.m. Her responsibilities included cleaning and preparing rooms after guest checkout, restocking supplies throughout the facility, managing the laundry operations that kept linens and towels fresh, and maintaining the cleanliness of common areas including the lobby, vending machine areas, and exterior walkways. Jennifer had developed efficient routines that allowed her to complete her work thoroughly while staying on schedule. She took pride in ensuring that every room was not just clean but welcoming, that every guest would find their accommodation prepared with care and attention to detail. She had earned recognition from management for her work quality and had developed positive relationships with many long-term guests who appreciated her professionalism and courtesy. On the morning of November 8th, Jennifer encountered something in room 23 that challenged her understanding of time, mortality, and the nature of housekeeping service itself. Jennifer began her shift by checking the front desk computer to identify which rooms needed service following overnight checkouts. Room 23 was listed as a standard checkout. The guest had departed early that morning, according to the system, and the room needed to be cleaned and prepared for new arrivals expected later that day. When Jennifer opened room 23 with her master key, she found the accommodation in an unusual condition that immediately caught her attention. The bed had clearly been slept in, with linens that showed typical signs of overnight use, but the sheets and blankets were arranged more neatly than most guests managed. The bathroom had obviously been used for morning routines, but it appeared cleaner than Jennifer typically found rooms after checkout. Most notably, the guests' personal belongings were still present throughout the room. Clothing was hanging in the closet. Toiletries were arranged on the bathroom counter with the precision of someone who had established a routine. And a suitcase sat open on the luggage rack with items folded and organized as if the guest intended to remain for an extended period. Jennifer initially assumed the guest had forgotten to pack some belongings before checkout, or had been called away suddenly and left items behind inadvertently. This situation occurred occasionally in the hospitality industry, and Budget Motor Lodge had standard procedures for collecting abandoned items and holding them at the front desk for guest retrieval. As Jennifer began gathering the seemingly abandoned belongings, she noticed they were all women's clothing and personal items, but they appeared to be from several decades earlier. The dresses displayed styles that had been popular in the 1980s, with shoulder padding, specific color combinations, and design details that belonged to that era. The shoes were designs that Jennifer recognized as having been fashionable in the early 1990s. The toiletries included brands and product types that had been discontinued years earlier. Jennifer was puzzled but continued collecting the items systematically, following her training for handling guest belongings left behind after checkout. As she was carefully packing the vintage clothing into a storage bag for safekeeping, she heard the bathroom shower turn on with the distinctive sound of water beginning to flow through the plumbing system. Jennifer called out, "Hello? Is someone in there? This is housekeeping." The shower continued running with the steady flow that indicated someone was actively using the facilities, but there was no verbal response to Jennifer's announcement. The sound was definitely that of someone taking a shower, water hitting the shower floor. Occasional changes in water pressure that suggested movement and soap use, and the normal duration of someone conducting morning hygiene routines. Jennifer approached the bathroom door, which was closed, and knocked firmly while calling out more loudly, "Excuse me, housekeeping services. I thought the room had been checked out. Please let me know when you'll be finished." Still no verbal response, but she could hear water running and what sounded like someone moving around in the shower stall. Jennifer could also hear what seemed to be someone humming or singing softly, a woman's voice, performing a tune that sounded familiar but that Jennifer couldn't immediately identify. Jennifer returned to the front desk to clarify the checkout situation with the morning clerk. According to the computer system, room 23 had indeed been officially checked out at 6:47 a.m. by a guest registered as Margaret Thompson. The room was supposed to be vacant and ready for housekeeping service in preparation for new guests. Is it possible Ms. Thompson returned to the room for belongings she forgot? Jennifer asked, trying to understand how someone could be using shower facilities in a room that showed as checked out in their system. The desk clerk, a young man named Mike who had been working at Budget Motor Lodge for about 6 months, checked the electronic keycard system that tracked room access. No additional entries recorded. Her keycard was automatically deactivated when she completed checkout procedures. Jennifer returned to room 23 with growing confusion about the situation. The shower was still running, and now she could hear more clearly what sounded like someone singing softly, a woman's voice humming, a melody that seemed to be from decades earlier, with the kind of casual, unconscious quality that people exhibited when they thought they were alone. Jennifer knocked on the bathroom door again, this time more insistently. "Ma'am, I need to clean the room for our next guests. Can you please let me know when you'll be finished in there?" The singing stopped immediately, but the shower continued running with the same steady flow. After several minutes with no response and no change in the situation, Jennifer decided she needed to investigate further to determine whether there was a legitimate guest in the room or whether there was some kind of Plumbing malfunction causing the shower to run. Automatically. Jennifer used her master key to open the bathroom door slowly and cautiously. The bathroom was empty. The shower was running hot water that filled the small space with steam, but there was no one inside the shower stall. The area was wet as if someone had been using it, with soap residue on the shower walls and water pooled on the floor. But there were no towels displaced, no personal hygiene items in use, and no signs of current occupancy beyond the running water. Jennifer turned off the shower and stood in the empty bathroom, trying to understand what she had experienced. She was certain she had heard someone using the shower and singing, but the space was clearly unoccupied and had been for some time based on the lack of personal items or ongoing activity. Jennifer returned to the main room area, feeling increasingly uncomfortable about the situation she couldn't explain. As she attempted to continue her housekeeping duties, she discovered that the personal items she had been packing were back in their original locations. Clothing rehung in the closet in precisely the same arrangements. Toiletries returned to the bathroom counter in identical positions. Suitcase unpacked on the luggage rack, exactly as she had initially found it. Jennifer was certain she had packed these items into the storage bag, but now they were arranged exactly as they had been when she first entered the room. The vintage clothing was displayed with the same care. The toiletries were positioned with the same precision, and the suitcase contents were folded and organized with the same attention to detail. Jennifer called the front desk again and asked Mike to come to room 23 immediately. When he arrived, Jennifer explained what she had experienced with the shower, the singing, and the personal belongings that seemed to return to their original positions after she moved them. Mike, I packed these belongings into storage, but they keep returning to their original positions. And someone was definitely using the shower, even though the computer system shows the room as vacant. Mike examined the personal belongings with growing interest and concern. Jennifer, these clothes are really old-fashioned. Look at the style details and brand labels. Some of these companies haven't existed for 20 years or more. Jennifer and Mike worked together to research the guest registration information for Margaret Thompson in their computer system. They discovered that while a Margaret Thompson had indeed stayed in room 23, the registration wasn't recent. According to their historical records, Margaret Thompson had been a long-term guest who had lived in room 23 for several months in 1994, nearly 30 years earlier. Why would our computer system show a checkout this morning for someone who was a guest here in 1994? Jennifer asked, becoming more concerned about the implications of their discovery. Mike made phone calls to former staff members who might remember Margaret Thompson from her extended stay decades earlier. An elderly former manager named Ruth, who had worked at Budget Motor Lodge during the 1990s, provided information that explained the unusual situation. Margaret Thompson lived in room 23 for about 6 months in 1994. Ruth explained when Mike reached her by phone. She was a very nice lady, probably in her 60s at the time, extremely clean and quiet. She kept the room absolutely spotless and never caused any problems or complaints from other guests. What happened to her? Why did she stop staying with you? Ruth's voice became sad. She died in room 23, heart attack I believe it was. We found her one morning when she didn't respond to housekeeping services. She had been deceased for a couple of days before we discovered her. Did she have family members who claimed her belongings? No family that we could locate anywhere. Her personal belongings stayed in the room for several months while the police and county authorities tried to find relatives or friends who might be responsible for her estate. Eventually, they donated her clothing and personal items to local charities. But for a long time, room 23 looked exactly like Margaret was still living there. Jennifer understood now why the personal belongings in room 23 seemed to belong to a different era and why they kept returning to their careful arrangements. Margaret Thompson was still living in room 23, maintaining her routine of showering, organizing her belongings, and keeping her temporary home clean and well-maintained. Jennifer decided to approach room 23 differently for the rest of her shift. Instead of treating it as a standard checkout cleaning, she worked around Margaret's continuing presence. She changed the bed linens carefully without disturbing the personal items, cleaned the bathroom after the shower had been used, and restocked supplies without moving the belongings that Margaret seemed to need for her ongoing residency. When Jennifer spoke to the room, addressing Margaret directly with the same courtesy she would show any guest, the housekeeping work proceeded smoothly. "Miss Thompson, I'm just going to vacuum the carpet and clean the bathroom. I'll be finished in a few minutes and won't disturb your belongings." The room seemed to respond positively to this respectful approach. There were no more mysterious showers during cleaning time, no more displaced belongings, and no confusion about the room's occupancy status. The housekeeping routine proceeded normally, as if Jennifer and Margaret were cooperating to maintain the room's cleanliness and comfort. Jennifer worked at Budget Motor Lodge for another 2 years, and room 23 became one of her most straightforward assignments. She learned Margaret's daily schedule: shower in the morning around the time Jennifer typically began her cleaning rounds, quiet time in the afternoon, and evening hours when Margaret seemed to watch television, programs that were popular during the 1990s. Jennifer would clean around these routines with the same consideration she would show any long-term guest, and Margaret seemed to appreciate the courtesy. Other housekeeping staff members found room 23 challenging and often reported strange occurrences: personal items that moved mysteriously, water running without explanation, sounds of occupancy in rooms that registered as vacant. But Jennifer never experienced problems with room 23 because she understood that Margaret Thompson remained a guest, entitled to the same respect and professional service that Budget Motor Lodge provided to all residents. Margaret had found a home at the motel, and she deserved to have that home maintained with dignity and care. Jennifer eventually left Budget Motor Lodge when she was offered a position at a larger hotel with better advancement opportunities. On her last day of work, she stopped by room 23 to say farewell to Margaret. "Miss Thompson, I'm starting a new job, so someone else will be taking care of your room. But I wanted to thank you for teaching me that good housekeeping means respecting the people who live in the spaces we clean, regardless of their official checkout status." That evening, Jennifer found a note slipped under her car windshield in the parking lot. The handwriting was elegant and old-fashioned, written in blue ink on hotel stationery. "Thank you for treating my home with care and dignity. You're a truly professional housekeeper." Enton, the Budget Motor Lodge continues to operate, serving working-class travelers and temporary residents who need affordable, clean accommodation. Room 23 remains one of their standard guest rooms, and current housekeeping staff report that it's surprisingly easy to maintain, always clean, never damaged, and seemingly cared for by a long-term resident who takes personal responsibility for keeping her home in excellent condition. Margaret Thompson found a permanent home at Budget Motor Lodge, and she continues to be an ideal long-term guest: quiet, clean, and appreciative of professional housekeeping service that treats her temporary accommodation with the respect and dignity that everyone deserves, regardless of their official reservation status. Some guests never check out because they've finally found accommodation that feels like home. Some housekeeping assignments involve cooperation with residents who exist beyond normal registration procedures, and some temporary lodging becomes permanent when it's maintained with professional pride, personal dignity, and mutual respect between guests and staff. Margaret Thompson's residency at Budget Motor Lodge represents the best of American hospitality: affordable accommodation provided with dignity, professional service that treats all guests with equal respect, and the understanding that some people need homes more than they need hotel rooms. Story 5. The Lost Weekend. Alex Rodriguez was driving from Denver to Phoenix when his 2018 Honda Accord suffered a complete transmission failure outside the small town of Cedar Falls, Arizona. It was Friday evening at 6:30 p.m., and Alex had been making excellent time on his business trip when the car suddenly lost power and coasted to a stop beside Highway 191. The timing couldn't have been worse. The local mechanic wouldn't be available until Monday morning, and Alex found himself stranded in a town he had never heard of for an unexpected 3-day weekend. Alex worked as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company, and the Phoenix trip was supposed to be a routine 3-day business visit to several hospitals and clinics in the Southwest. He had planned to arrive Friday evening, conduct business meetings Saturday and Monday, and drive back to Denver on Tuesday. The car breakdown meant canceling his weekend meetings and extending his trip by several days. Cedar Falls, Arizona, was a small desert community that existed primarily to serve travelers on Highway 191 and the few ranchers and mining operations scattered throughout the surrounding area. The town featured one main street with essential businesses, a gas station, a small cafe, a general store, and the Pine Valley Motel, which was apparently the only lodging option for hundreds of miles in any direction. Alex checked into the Pine Valley Motel with some apprehension, expecting accommodations that reflected the town's remote location and limited resources. But Room 9 proved to be clean, comfortable, and adequately equipped for an extended stay. The room featured a double bed with fresh linens, a small television with cable channels, a compact refrigerator, and a bathroom with reliable hot water. The air conditioning worked effectively against the desert heat, and the room's large window offered views of the surrounding mountains. The Pine Valley Motel was a small, family-owned establishment that had been serving travelers for probably 30 years. The office was operated by a friendly woman named Betty, who seemed to know every resident of Cedar Falls personally. Betty provided Alex with information about local restaurants, suggestions for activities to occupy his time during the forced weekend stay, and recommendations for hiking trails and scenic drives in the area. Alex paid for 3 nights and settled into Room 9, planning to make the best of his unexpected weekend in rural Arizona. He had his laptop, cell phone, and enough work materials to stay productive until his car could be repaired. The delay was inconvenient, but not catastrophic. He could reschedule his business meetings and use the time to catch up on reports and correspondence. Friday evening passed uneventfully. Alex worked on his laptop, ordered dinner from the town's small cafe, and watched television before going to sleep early. He planned to spend Saturday exploring Cedar Falls and the surrounding area, getting some exercise and enjoying the break from his normally hectic travel schedule. Alex woke Saturday morning feeling refreshed and ready to explore his temporary surroundings. When he checked his phone to see the time and review his messages, however, he discovered something that immediately captured his attention. The date on his phone showed Friday, not Saturday. Alex assumed there was a technical glitch with his phone's date and time settings, possibly related to poor cellular reception in the remote area. He didn't think much about it initially. Electronic devices sometimes experienced errors, and he had more important things to focus on during his unexpected vacation weekend. Alex showered, dressed in casual clothing appropriate for desert hiking, and walked into town to find breakfast and get oriented with Cedar Falls geography and available activities. The town was even smaller than he had initially realized, basically one main street with a few essential businesses, serving local residents and occasional travelers. Alex found breakfast at Mary's Cafe, a family-owned restaurant that appeared to be the social center of Cedar Falls. The waitress was friendly and talkative, providing recommendations for hiking trails and information about local history. The conversation felt comfortable and informative, Exactly what Alex needed to plan his Saturday activities. Alex spent the day hiking the trail that led to a scenic overlook about 3 miles outside town. The desert landscape was more beautiful than he had expected, with dramatic rock formations, diverse plant life, and spectacular views of distant mountains. The physical exercise felt good after weeks of business travel and hotel confinement, and Alex found himself appreciating the forced break from his normal routine. Saturday evening, Alex returned to Pine Valley Motel tired, but satisfied with his day of exploration. He worked on his laptop for a few hours, ordered dinner from Mary's Cafe, and prepared for another night in room 9 before checking on his car repair Monday morning. When Alex woke Sunday morning, his phone again showed Friday's date. Not Saturday, not Sunday, Friday. The same Friday he had checked into Pine Valley Motel 2 days earlier. Alex was now concerned about his phone's technical problems and decided to ask at the motel office about the correct date. Betty confirmed that according to her calendar and the local newspaper, it was indeed Friday, specifically the same Friday that Alex had checked into the motel. Friday? Alex said, confused by the information. But I checked in Friday, spent Saturday hiking, and this should be Sunday morning. Betty looked at Alex with genuine puzzlement. Sir, you checked in yesterday evening around 6:30. This is Saturday morning. Alex was certain he had already spent a full day in Cedar Falls, had already hiked the recommended trail, had already had extensive conversations with local people about the area's history and attractions. But according to Betty and his phone, he had only been in town for about 12 hours. Alex decided to test his growing suspicion by repeating his Saturday activities to see if his sense of familiarity was accurate. He went to Mary's Cafe and ordered the same breakfast he remembered having the previous day. The conversation with the waitress proceeded exactly as he expected. Same recommendations for hiking trails, same local information, same personal anecdotes about life in Cedar Falls. The waitress provided identical suggestions, using identical words and phrases that Alex remembered from what he thought had been the previous day. Every detail of their conversation matched his memories perfectly, as if Alex was experiencing the precise repeat of events that had already occurred. Alex hiked the same trail he remembered hiking on Saturday. Every landmark, every scenic viewpoint, every wildlife sighting occurred exactly as he anticipated. He took photographs of the same locations from the same angles, and when he reviewed the digital images on his camera, they were identical to photos he was certain he had taken during his previous hike. That evening, Alex carefully examined his situation and tried to understand what was happening to his perception of time and sequence of events. His phone consistently showed Friday and Saturday dates, but he had clear memories of experiencing 3 complete days since checking into Pine Valley Motel. Alex decided to test his theory more systematically by making specific predictions about Sunday's activities. He wrote detailed notes about what he expected to happen the following day, which people he would meet, what conversations he would have, what he would observe during his exploration of Cedar Falls and the surrounding area. When Alex woke Monday morning, his phone showed Sunday's date, and his written predictions proved completely accurate in every detail. Every conversation, every interaction, every experience proceeded exactly as he had documented the night before. Alex realized he was experiencing the same 3 days, repeatedly. Friday check-in and orientation, Saturday exploration and hiking, and Sunday preparation for departure. Each cycle felt completely natural and realistic, but he was apparently the only person who retained memory of previous iterations of the same time period. Alex went to the motel office and asked Betty about other guests who might have experienced similar temporal anomalies or time distortion effects, time problems. Betty responded with a knowing smile. You're not the first guest to mention that kind of experience. We've had several travelers over the years who claimed they were living the same days over and over. What do you tell them when they report these experiences? That Cedar Falls is a special place where some people find exactly what they need, even if they don't realize what they need when they arrive. Some visitors find the area so peaceful and restorative that they don't want their experience to end. So it doesn't end until they're ready. Asterisk, asterisk. Are you saying the town deliberately traps visitors in time loops? Betty's expression became more serious and thoughtful. I'm saying that some people need a break from their normal lives, even if they don't recognize that need consciously. Cedar Falls provides that break. When you're genuinely ready to continue your journey, really ready, not just intellectually ready, time will start moving forward again. Alex considered Betty's explanation carefully. His life in Denver had indeed become increasingly stressful over the past year, filled with demanding travel schedules, difficult client relationships, sales quotas, and personal pressures that left little time for reflection or genuine relaxation. The forced stop in Cedar Falls was providing him with something he hadn't experienced in months: time to think clearly, to explore beautiful natural areas, to have unhurried conversations with friendly people, and to exist without the constant pressure of deadlines and obligations. Alex stopped trying to break the time loop and started appreciating the opportunity it represented. He used the repeated days to explore different hiking trails around Cedar Falls, to have longer conversations with local residents, to read books he had been meaning to read for months, and to think seriously about what he wanted from his career and personal life. The repeated Friday, Saturday, Sunday cycles gave Alex the equivalent of several weeks of vacation time, allowing him to rest, reflect, and gain perspective on his life direction and priorities. He began to understand why the universe might have provided this unexpected gift of time and reflection, after what felt like multiple weeks of repeated 3-day cycles. Alex woke one Monday morning to find that time was moving forward normally. His phone displayed the correct date that followed chronologically from his extended weekend, and when he went to check on his car repair, the mechanic confirmed that it was indeed Monday and his vehicle was ready for pickup. How long did the transmission repair actually take? Alex asked the mechanic, curious about the objective time frame for his stay in Cedar Falls. Just the weekend, exactly like I estimated. You dropped it off Friday evening, and I had it ready Monday morning. Standard repair timeline. Alex checked out of Pine Valley Motel, understanding that his experience had been both temporal anomaly and personal gift. The repeated days had given him clarity about his life priorities and determination to make significant changes in his work-life balance when he returned to Denver. When Alex returned to Colorado, he restructured his sales territory to reduce travel requirements, ended a romantic relationship that had been causing stress rather than providing support, and began making time for outdoor activities that brought him genuine satisfaction and peace. Alex frequently thinks about his weekend in Cedar Falls and wonders if other stranded travelers have discovered that sometimes the best way to continue a journey is to first spend enough time standing still to understand where you really want to go. Cedar Falls, Arizona, continues to serve travelers who find themselves unexpectedly delayed by mechanical problems, weather conditions, or other circumstances beyond their control. Betty continues to operate Pine Valley Motel with the understanding that some guests need more than just accommodation. They need time and space to gain perspective on their life direction. Some car breakdowns are mechanical failures. Others are opportunities disguised as inconveniences. And some small desert towns provide more than just services for stranded travelers. They offer the chance to slow down enough to remember what's truly important in life. The Pine Valley Motel's guest register shows that Alex Rodriguez stayed for one weekend in room 9. But Alex's experience was measured in weeks of reflection, exploration, and personal growth that prepared him to continue his journey with greater wisdom and clearer priorities. Some motels provide beds and bathrooms. Others provide the time and space needed to repair not just vehicles, but lives that have been running too fast to appreciate the scenery along the way.